A packed courtroom, a billionaire's smirk, and a pregnant woman standing alone, trembling but refusing to back down. No one could have predicted what happened next. In front of dozens of witnesses, the billionaire's girlfriend lunges forward and delivers a vicious slap across the woman's face, so hard it echoes through the chamber. But what nobody knows is that the judge presiding over this case isn't just any judge. He's the brother she thought died 30 years ago. Tonight, everything explodes. This is a story about betrayal, hidden truths, and the kind of justice that hits when you least expect it. Tell us what time you're watching and where you're from. Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your voice. The autumn morning outside the Manhattan family court felt unnaturally cold. News vans lined the street. Protesters held signs on both sides of the barricade. Some demanded justice for abuse victims. Others waved banners defending Marcus Castellano, the real estate mogul whose empire stretched across 3 states. His face smiled from magazine covers inside nearby newsstands, the picture of American success. Emma Carter stood at the bottom of the courthouse steps. She was 27 years old and 6 months pregnant. Her modest gray dress hung loosely over her growing belly. Her hands shook as she clutched a thin folder containing restraining order documents. She had never imagined her marriage would end here in front of cameras and strangers, but she needed to protect herself. She needed to protect her baby. She took a slow breath and began climbing the steps. Camera flashes erupted around her. A reporter shouted her name, asking if the abuse allegations were true. Another yelled whether she was after Marcus's money. Emma kept her eyes down and kept walking. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. A black Rolls-Royce pulled up to the curb. The crowd shifted instantly. Marcus Castellano stepped out first, his tailored charcoal suit fitting him like armor. His dark hair was slicked back perfectly. His expression radiated confidence. Beside him emerged Natasha Rain, a former model turned influencer, dressed in a blood-red dress that commanded attention. They walked together as if attending a movie premiere, laughing softly at some private joke. The contrast between their polished appearance and Emma's anxious vulnerability made the crowd murmur with unease. Inside the courtroom, tension thickened. The room was cold, sterile, and intimidating. Emma sat at the petitioner's table with her attorney, a young public defender who looked barely older than Emma herself. She tried to focus on breathing. Her baby kicked gently inside her, as if sensing her fear. At the front of the room sat Judge Thomas Carter. His silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes reflected decades of experience. He surveyed the courtroom with disciplined calm. But when his gaze landed on Emma, something flickered behind his expression. He couldn't explain it. There was something hauntingly familiar about her face, her posture, the way she held herself. He forced himself to remain professional and nodded for the proceedings to begin. Emma's attorney stood and outlined the request for protection and temporary custody. He described months of financial control, isolation, and emotional threats. Emma kept her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move as if responding to the tension in the room. Marcus's attorney rose with rehearsed sympathy. He claimed Emma suffered from pregnancy-induced anxiety. He suggested she misunderstood normal marital disagreements. He even implied she fabricated stories to secure a larger settlement. The courtroom shifted uncomfortably, but Marcus sat back with supreme confidence. Behind Marcus, Natasha sat with her arms crossed, smirking openly. Every time Emma's name was mentioned, Natasha rolled her eyes or whispered mockingly. Her contempt was so blatant that even Marcus's attorney glanced back nervously. When Emma's attorney mentioned Marcus's infidelity and the prenuptial agreement he had forced Emma to sign while she was hospitalized, Natasha exploded. She stood abruptly and shouted, "She's lying! She trapped him with that pregnancy!" Judge Carter slammed his gavel. "Ms. Rain, sit down immediately. You have no right to interrupt." Marcus reached back calmly and placed a possessive hand on Natasha's arm. She sank back into her seat, fury radiating from her clenched jaw. The judge motioned for Emma to speak. She stood slowly, her hands still on her stomach. Her voice came out quiet but steady. She described nights when Marcus cut off her credit cards. She described weeks when he locked her phone and refused to let her contact her family. She described the night he told her that if she ever tried to leave, he would make sure she never saw her child again. As she spoke, the courtroom grew still. Even skeptical faces began to soften. Emma felt exposed, but also strangely determined. She wanted her baby to know she had fought. Natasha couldn't stand the attention shifting away from her. She whispered something harsh to Marcus, but he ignored her. Anger built in her face until her knuckles turned white, gripping the seat. Then it happened. Natasha jumped to her feet with explosive fury and lunged toward Emma. Before anyone could react, she delivered a vicious slap across Emma's face so hard that Emma stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek. The courtroom erupted in chaos. Security rushed forward. Emma stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, her hand trembling against her reddened cheek. Judge Carter's face drained of all color. His voice, usually calm and measured, burst out in a shout that shook the walls. "Security! Restrain her immediately. Someone call the paramedics." His eyes were locked on Emma, who stood trembling and terrified. And for reasons he couldn't yet understand, the sight hit him with a pain he'd never felt before in his courtroom. The hours that followed blurred together in a haze of police reports, medical examinations, and relentless media coverage. Emma sat in a private hospital room while doctors checked for any harm to the baby. Fetal monitor beeped steadily beside her, each sound a fragile reassurance. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Drop the case or I'll bury you." Another message came from Natasha. "You're nothing, he'll take that baby and you'll never see it again." Emma closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. She felt more alone than ever. Then the door opened quietly. Judge Carter stepped inside, no longer in his robes, just a man in a simple shirt and jacket. He looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. "I'm sorry to intrude," he said softly, "but I need to speak with you." Emma wiped her eyes. "Why are you here?" He hesitated, then reached into his jacket and pulled out an old photograph. He handed it to her carefully. Emma stared at the image. It showed two children, a boy and a girl, standing in front of a small house. The girl looked exactly like Emma's mother in the one childhood photo Emma still owned. "That's my sister," Thomas said quietly. "Her name was Sarah Carter. She disappeared 30 years ago during a house fire. I was told she didn't survive, but I recently discovered that wasn't true. She was taken by our foster parents and her identity was erased." Emma's hands began to shake. "My mother's name was Sarah." Thomas nodded, tears filling his eyes. "I believe you're my niece, Emma. I believe your mother was my sister." The world seemed to tilt. Emma couldn't breathe. She had grown up believing she had no family, no roots, no one. And now, standing in front of her, was the uncle she never knew existed. "I'll help you," Thomas said firmly. "I'll withdraw from the case to avoid conflict of interest, but I'm going to make sure Marcus Castellano never hurts you again." The next 72 hours moved like a whirlwind. Thomas hired the best family attorney in the state. A forensic accountant uncovered Marcus's hidden assets and offshore accounts used to hide money from previous partners. A private investigator found 3 other women Marcus had threatened and silenced with settlements. The case exploded across social media. Justice for Emma trended nationally. People shared Emma's story, demanding accountability. Marcus tried to fight back with expensive PR teams, but the truth was too overwhelming. His image crumbled. Sponsors dropped him. Business partners distanced themselves. On the day of the final hearing, Marcus arrived in handcuffs, charged with witness intimidation and financial fraud. Natasha faced assault charges and was escorted into the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, her glamorous facade completely shattered. The new judge reviewed the mountain of evidence and delivered the ruling. Marcus was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Natasha received 3 years. Emma was granted full custody, a restraining order, and a significant portion of Marcus's assets to support her and the baby. Emma sat in the courtroom, tears streaming down her face, but this time they were tears of relief. Thomas sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. "You're safe now," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore." 3 months later, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Sarah, after the mother she lost and the family she found. Thomas held his great niece in the hospital room, tears streaming down his weathered face. For the first time in 30 years, he felt whole. Emma looked at her daughter and whispered, "You're going to know what family means. You're going to know you're loved." If this story moved you, if it reminded you that justice is possible even when the world feels stacked against you, leave a comment below. Share this video with someone who needs hope. And remember, you are never as alone as you think. There are people fighting. There is always a way forward. Drop a heart if you believe in second chances. We're reading every single comment.